Hi, Cynthia.
Hey, Tiffany, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Great, great. Is that your artwork back behind you?
It is, yeah. Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah. Some arrow action.
It's
Yeah.
lovely. Yeah,
Yeah. So thanks for getting together with me.
glad
I,
to be here.
I have this Creative Sparks thing coming up, which has got me just thinking about how creative sparks manifest in people differently and people that I am inspired by. And I've been inspired by what you've done with the Feldenkrais Summit and just curious to hear about how that came about, this idea to create this online Feldenkrais Awareness Summit, and would love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, so for me, my problem is not coming up with, my problem is not that I don't come up with ideas. My problem is that I come up with too many. And so it feels like for the last 20 years, what I've been doing is learning to tamp down my creative spark because
Mm.
if I were going to do everything I wanted to do in my life, it would be, many lifetimes. Uh, so, and the other thing that has been, and this relates to the summit, the other thing is that even though they seem like really fabulous ideas, and some of them I manifest, some of them I don't, um, they aren't always fabulous ideas in that people don't always resonate with them, right? So the summit, I participated in other summits over the last, I guess 5 or 6 years now, other online summits. And as I was participating in them and watching just how insanely popular they are with people, I mean, people are signing up for not Feldenkrais summits, but other summits, and 30, 40, 100,000 people online signing up. It's an incredible force of and use, I think, of the connection that the web can have for us. And so I started taking it started to percolate in my mind as it might be a possibility. And then I started taking some classes online related to summits and other kinds of online sharing of events. I began to watch how the Feldenkrais practitioners around the world group was really doing well, with several thousand people coming together and people actually interacting on the Facebook group. So that made me think that maybe there was a potential for that to really go somewhere. And then I watched and participated in Kwan's AY a Day group, and saw again that practitioners were coming together. And one thing that I knew from researching the summits and participating is that their potential to actually do something comes from however many people are excited and willing to be a part of it. And it's not something that one person does, even though I've been working on the current one for 9 months in a very significant way every single week. That even though that's true, the actual success of it comes from everybody else that is excited about it and able to get on board. And so it just seemed like we might, as a community, as a Feldenkrais community, we might be at the right time. Certainly the internet and the capacity, the technological capacities to do it were at the right time. And also, I just didn't think I had too many more years I would want to do something like this. So I felt like now was my time. Last year was my time. I kind of played with it a couple years prior and decided I didn't have the capacity to pull it off. And then I went ahead and went for it, as you know, in 2018. And yeah, it went, I think, very well for our first summit, extremely well for the first summit, although certainly there were big learning curves for all of us, but definitely learning curves for me and my team. And then I'm really excited now to try to do the second one, and we're on our way.
Yeah. And how are you going to do this one differently, or what do you see as?
Yeah. So this one is quite a bit different. has a track system. So basically people are organized into tracks. And actually, what people probably don't know is a lot of it is pre-recorded, although it will feel very live. And that's what allowed us to do tracks. We couldn't do tracks really unless because then the tracks are just everywhere according to people's schedules. You can't really organize it. So there were some things that we had last year that we knew we wanted to try to do better with this year. One was that we had no options really for people who were deaf or hard of hearing to participate last year. And that didn't feel right to me. I think, it just would be better if we can be more inclusive to that community. And Brent Schwab, I think is how he says his last name, is in our Feldenkrais community and is a hard of hearing individual. And he worked to put together an incredible video of our awareness through movement lesson that was with verbal instructions for that community that we did for the 18 languages last year around the world. So one of them was this option for people who would not be able to hear the teaching from the audio lessons. So he kind of, his letting me know about the fact that that community is really, of course I know they're there, but I don't know that I've ever really thought about the service to that community as much as I could. So I wanted to do that. And that allows us to get captions for almost all the sessions, which means it's now accessible to almost everyone. And that's important, I think, as a change this year. We also have this capacity that even though some of the sessions were pre-recorded, we can still have live chat going on beside it. And that's kind of cool. So you're still interacting with each other and we're still looking at the chat. We're going to use the chat to fold into what are the definitely pure live panel discussions. And again, there'll be chat there. Another thing that's kind of neat is that some of the instructors, because they're busy being interviewed by me, right? They can't really interact in chat. They're going to come back and interact in the chat. They've already said, I'm going to be in the chat while my presentation is going on, and I'm going to, be there. I'm going to let people know I'm there, and people will be able to talk to me, even though I'm also on the screen talking to you. So I think there's some, some advantages to it. We'll see how people like it, but it allowed us to do this thing with tracks and also to serve the community of deaf and hard of hearing.
Nice.
So that's our biggest changes. Oh, the panel discussions. The panel discussions is a completely new thing. So that has allowed us to involve a lot more people in terms of practitioners. And then also new this year was the morning and evening awareness through movement lessons. Okay. And that we heard from people last year that especially for people who were new, they were looking for easy ways to actually do the Feldenkrais method. And so having them embedded in the talks was difficult for them to go back and grab just the movement part. So we have Arafili Nikolakopoulou and Dorothy Hennig are teaching in the morning. It's a video teaching. In the evening, it's an audio teaching.
Nice, nice. Can you mention a couple of the tracks?
Yeah. So the one that's on my mind at the moment, because I just finished one of the interviews, is Beyond Diagnosis. And that track has Ellen Soloway with vision. It has Chuz Jimenez, who is talking about balance and neuropathy. And then we have a non-Feldenkrais practitioner, Dr. Pradeep, sorry, my mouth is not clear today, Pradeep Chopra. It's not that hard to say. And he's talking about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and chronic regional pain syndrome. And then we have a discussion afterwards about how the Feldenkrais work can help with those things. So he's giving us a really good education for our communities. Those issues actually affect a lot more people than anyone realizes. And so some people may actually go, oh my gosh, I think that might be me. And I never understood that might be me. And for practitioners, it will definitely give people an idea of who's been coming into their practices they've been finding puzzling all these years, and then go, aha, okay, now I have an understanding I didn't have before. So I think it'll be good for a lot of people.
Cool. Great.
So that's beyond diagnosis. We have a creativity track, which has got Uri Vardi, Jaime Polanco. So Uri Vardi is a celloist. I believe that's correct. I'm not the one who did that interview, and he's going to be talking about his work with musicians. Jaime Polanco is going to be talking about the use of magic and lateral thinking. And who is the third one in that track? Oh, Madeline Kent, talking about how to get unstuck from writer's block. So it's really a big variety. We actually didn't repeat any topics from last year. Not only did we not repeat speakers, but we didn't repeat topics.
Great. And what is your vision of how, like, where the summit will go or how it will impact beyond the Feldenkrais community? It sounds like I'm hearing also how by bringing in non-Feldenkrais people that will support the Feldenkrais community to be learning more about what it is that we're already doing and how we could help more people. And yeah, so in both of those directions, for the Feldenkrais community and for beyond.
Yeah. So, you know, my original vision for the summit was not to be a continuing education program for Feldenkrais practitioners. I feel like there's plenty of those options out there, and I don't see any reason that a summit is needed for that, in my opinion. Now, what I heard from practitioners last year was that it filled a huge need for them in terms of professional continuing education, as well as connecting with other practitioners. So I appreciate that that happened, but it actually wasn't certainly not my main goal. The main goal for me is twofold, and we maybe felt it maybe a little bit more clearly last year, but I hope it's still present this year, which is to be inclusive, so to recognize that there are other bodies of work. So we had a lot last year of Feldenkrais and yoga, or Feldenkrais and parkour, and Feldenkrais and blah, blah, blah. We did a lot of that last year within each talk. And my aim was to really begin to open up this more inclusive environment in which we're living in now, right? I mean, we are not meant to be in silos anymore, which doesn't mean that each work doesn't have something unique to offer, but it does mean that we need to come out of our siloed sort of existence and start to ask ourselves, how can we work together? How do we complement each other? How are we different? But also, how can we complement each other? That's a change for us in the Feldenkrais community. We've tended to be very protective of our work and of Moshe Feldenkrais's legacy, which I don't think is a bad thing, but I think the time is now that we begin to become more and more inclusive and a little bit more permeable and willing to collaborate with other fields and to really respect and honor what other fields are bringing forward. We haven't done enough of that in the past, in my opinion. So that was one of the things I wanted to see with was this inclusiveness. The other thing is that, you know, I thought about like how many people have trained in Feldenkrais as practitioners over the years. Well, that around the world, that's got to be, I mean, it's got to be 13, 14, 15, 20,000 people, really. I mean, we don't think of the Feldenkrais world as being very big. And then if you think about how many people all of us have impacted, well, I've impacted before the summit, I've impacted thousands of people. Thousands of people have been introduced to the Feldenkrais method through me. Thousands of people have been introduced to the Feldenkrais method through you. And so there isn't really any reason with that kind of available pool to draw from. If we can get that pool enthusiastic about sharing the summit, there isn't any reason why we can't have a summit of 10,000 or 20,000 people. There really isn't. You know, we made 7,000 last year. My goal for this year's is 10,000, and we'll see if we get there or not. The registrations are starting off a little slow, so I'm hoping that's gonna. It's decent. We're at 2,000, a little over 2,000, but I mean, we haven't got that long now till the summit starts. I know to people it seems like a long time, but it's actually coming up quick on May 1st. So I mean, where else can we have this possibility of reaching 7,000 people with a single event in the Feldenkrais world? We really don't have that before. And if we can make that to 10,000 this year, that's fantastic. And I think that provides people, I don't know about you, but my clients over the years have said, well, I try to tell people about it and it's hard to tell them about, and it's, I don't know, they get kind of tired in their enthusiasm, right? Sometimes I think it gives them an option for sharing and makes it easier for them to be enthusiastic and to know that they're part of a community that's vibrant. It's not everybody out in their own little world, just all doing their own thing, but that it's a vibrant community that they can be really pleased to be a part of.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Cool. And then for the people that are new to Feldenkrais and that are coming to it for the first time, or maybe have heard about it, what's your hope for them?
Yeah, well, I really think the opening lessons are going to be phenomenal. So the opening and ending lessons for the day will give them their first opportunity to do awareness through movement, which we sometimes call ATM, but awareness through movement. Of course, we can't give people a real taste, even a partial taste of functional integration, the private one-on-one sessions, but we will be talking about it a bit with Donna Blank's talk on embodied connection, and we'll be showing a very small clip of a small piece of a functional integration lesson. I think we could maybe do more with that in the future somehow, but yeah, I think it's a good entry place, and then people can look for the topic that interests them. So is it tango? Is it working out? Is it pain? Is it the research? We have people signing up that are people that have, writing in on the Feldenkrais Awareness Summit community hub, the Facebook group that Stefan Vilchangs started for us last year. That group, people are writing in and saying, I'm here because I have pain and I want to know more, or they're writing in and saying, I've been doing Feldenkrais for a while, but there are people who are saying, I'm completely new and it's just come onto my radar. So I'm hoping to really learn a lot about it. So I think there's enough variety in the talks. Of course, basically there's 6 sessions a day. There's 2 lessons, there's 3 talks, there's 1 panel discussion. They start at 6:30 in the morning. They don't end until the 8:30 session for going to bed. And that's, by the way, Eastern Daylight Time. So, for somebody else, somewhere else in the world, some of those sessions are during your sleep. And so you can't do them all. Nobody expects you to do them all. But you can pick out, when you register and you get the schedule, you can go through and go, boy, these are the things I want to do. I want to do all the morning lessons, or as many of them as I can. And then over here, there's that talk on what we know about research so far. There's the talk on stroke and TBI, traumatic brain injury, or on Parkinson's. Maybe it's not me that has Parkinson's, but maybe it's a family member, and I'd like to be able to help them a little bit more with that. So I think the variety, both in an active lifestyle and creative exploration, is there, as well as people struggling with very specific types of problems. And the summit this year is a little more oriented towards specific types of problems that people might identify with.
Mm-hmm. The variety is so grand. It's wonderful. And I love the tracks. I think that kind of can help people orient.
You like it?
Yeah. To where they might, with all of that's going on, kind of grouping things into those categories of interest. I think that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope it works for people. And, that's one of the problems with the Feldenkrais work, is that it's quite so grand, as you would say. As you and I know, as people who've been looking at marketing programs and how to help people through online programs, the kiss of death to online programming is trying to do everything for everybody. And so over and over, what they say is you need to funnel down to a very specific demographic with a very specific need set. And that's what you go for. And if you speak the language of going for everybody, you won't get anybody. Well, that's a very big challenge for us as the Feldenkrais method,
Mm-hmm.
because your practice and my practice is made up of a very wide mix of people. And when you, if we wanted to do a summit on just Feldenkrais and work with artists, I suppose we could, right? Because there's all kinds of artistic people out there that can make a lot of use out of the Feldenkrais work. But it's not telling the whole picture of the Feldenkrais work and what its potential is. So I don't know, it's a bit of a conundrum to me that we haven't maybe figured out to solve, but maybe a summit can help solve it. I don't know, to show the breadth and the depth and make it tangible and not so grandiose, where people go, oh, you know, if you think you can do something for everybody, therefore that's so over the top grandiose, I might dismiss it and put it off to the side. I'm hoping people will get an understanding that the reason that the Feldenkrais method is so grandiose is it's so simple. It is so simple. It is just those simple words of Feldenkrais about learning to learn. That's it. And if you take learning to learn and you see the vocabulary that human beings do with their ability to learn, that's the same vocabulary or the same way that we can impact people with the Feldenkrais method. The Feldenkrais method is not nearly as complicated as people think. It's actually quite simple in many ways, in that it's capitalizing on this thing that we're already born with, which is the ability to learn, and just using that. So
I have this question bubbling about what you said earlier with this narrowing of your creative sparks, or not, that's not the word you use, but like that you have a lot of
I
ideas.
said tamping down. Yeah.
Tamping down. Yeah.
Well,
Tamping
I'm a little
down.
bit manic in my creativity, so I have to tamp it down.
Yeah. And so how do you use learning to learn to tamp it down? Or how do you, like, what is your process of discerning? Because I also have many ideas,
Yeah.
as you know, and I'm in that process too, of like how to, you know, both like prune and choose and discern and also weave together. So yeah, curious about your process around that.
Well, I think as time has gone on, I have a better understanding of how much work is involved in actually actualizing something. And then I'm also think I have a little bit better idea of whether it's going to actually actualize in a way that's pleasing to me. So I'm more likely now to ask myself those kinds of questions. Okay, whatever amount of, so I guess I would back up and say people will often make suggestions to me about what I could do with the summit or what I could do with anything. And those questions are, those ideas are wonderful, but they also show within it a naivete about what goes into making something happen. So I've got enough experience now to realize actually what it takes to make something happen. And then I also have enough experience now to go really ask myself, do I actually have the physical and mental energy for that? So there's a limited amount of physical and mental energy that I have, and I'm very much more aware of it now at this stage of my life than I was at 35. So that's a big piece of my decision matrix. And then the next piece of it is, as I look back over what I've done and what I feel has been successful or not successful. And yes, you can say that everything is feedback, and that's true. Like I've done so many things that are not successful, that to have the successful summit last year is actually built off of all those things I did that were not successful. But I would like to spend more of my time now producing that success and not that feeling of, oh, okay, I learned something. That's great. No, I learned something, which was, okay, there might have been a better way to do that, blah, 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 and just, and kind of parse it apart. I'd like to have a little bit more chance for the actual success so that my time spent feels like it actually really yielded something that is important. So I think those are my two major ways in which I discern is, you know, what does it really take, and do I have the time and energy and financial resources for it? And if not, like the summit, I don't have the financial resources for this. I do go into considerable debt to make it happen. And then I hope that it pays for itself and maybe pays me for a little bit of my time. That's what I hope for. And but I really wanted to do this, man. I really wanted to do it. So I really, really felt strongly it could be a success. So I decided to take the risk on it last year and this year again. So,
and is there anything in that, like, that you really, really wanted to do it and you really had a sense that it would go well, that it would be a success? Like, is there anything else in your experience of that clarity that you're aware of aside from the things that you've said? I'm just curious that, like,
where that I've had that similar experience, or
no, just like in that clarity of something that you really, really, that you really wanted to do, the summit. I know you had done the research and you had seen it. I'm just curious.
Oh, I think it had to do also with a feeling of limited time. Like I have two thoughts about limited time. One is, how many years would I want to do this? Where I'm at, I just turned 60. I had a neurological event a couple years ago that was significant for me, and learning to understand what that means for me. And then the other piece is, summits won't be popular forever, because they aren't, you know? I mean, that's just nothingness. They all have a shelf life. And with things that are related to online, it will be some other variation, but it would also mean that you would retrain over that whole thing. So I'm just, based on online programming, I wouldn't think that summits would be popular for much more than another 2 or 3 years. They've been going on strong for 6, really strong for 6. That's a pretty long life in internet-based fads, if you want to call it a fad, which I think we, probably can to some degree. So I don't, I felt a limited time window to be able to make this thing happen that I felt really strongly about. I also had the right assistant. I realized, there's no way you can do this kind of thing without a really solid team. And we're a tiny practice, and I have an assistant who's extremely sharp, Arlene Klein. And I have my past assistant, Julie Loneman, who has been working with me for years and continues to work with me on graphics and designs and logos and things. I felt like, wow, I've got 2 people that I trust. I don't know how long I'll have them in my life. And I can see where they fill in gaps that I don't have, and they come through. So there was probably also that was in my mind, because they also have lives and they go on and move on. Julie left me a few years ago and moved away, and she just does contract work for me now. And Arlene is actually on as a contract person for me at this point too. She started her own business. So, people have their own things that they want to go on to.
So there's something about the timing felt really
timing. Yeah. The timing.
And now I'm curious too, how does this summit project fit in with your private practice and your teaching, and have you had to kind of limit that, or how are you working with that balance?
Well, I haven't been able to take new clients for the last 3 months. And I've actually had to call and cancel some of my existing clients. I couldn't keep up with my client load. I've cut back on my sessions per week that I could see people much sooner this time. Last time I was able to kind of crazily tried to continue right up to the moment, and even some during the summit. This time I knew pretty early on that wasn't going to work. I have to say my clients are really supportive. So those of them that have already been with me for a while are excited to see it. They feel, I'd say, proud based on how they talk about it. And they see the camera set up and the lights, and they sign up for it and participate. But it definitely means I can't teach classes during the time, and I can't see as many people.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's a pretty big decision. And I just, I've been putting people on a wait list for a while. And so I just started calling the people on that wait list and saying, I'm ready to start scheduling you in a month. And I'll be able to start scheduling you, mid to end of May. And working through that, and then also trying to get everybody else back on the schedule that wants to be back on the schedule. So yeah, it has an impact.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a choice. For me, because of my background, so I originally was in healthcare management and program development. So I was used to working in teams that produced really incredibly large projects, and that had huge facets, that had huge impact on people's lives, that could be very, very negative or very, very positive. If laboratory results are correct, that can be positive. If they're not correct, that can be negative, blah, 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 blah. So I was used to this sort of project development of complex projects, and I was also used to teamwork. And that was something I really missed once I became a Feldenkrais practitioner. I liked the fact that the rhythm of the practice was slow and easy, and that was a big blessing and a lot of why I wanted to move out of the work, although I was also pretty disillusioned too with a lot of healthcare at the time. But then after I'm out for a while, I started to feel like a real hunger for that kind of dynamic, sort of challenging of my mind in a very different way. Mm-hmm. And the summit does that for me.
Cool. Cool. And I have one more question about how because I know you have the Feldenkrais and movement intelligence, and then the integral human gait theory.
Right.
And how you weave those together. Like when someone comes to you, do you have just like a menu of these things that you draw upon, or do people come for a specific one of those?
People rarely come for a specific one of those. People come because they want to come to me.
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally someone actually knows what the Feldenkrais work is, or actually knows what the Bones for Life work is, or movement intelligence. But that's got to be maybe 1%. The reason people really come is because they've heard my name and they're coming to me, and they really don't care what I'm doing as long as it works, right? That's not why they're here. They're here because they have some level of trust that's been imbued to them by virtue of someone else who has referred them or talked about, or they participated in some kind of introductory event or something that I've done that allows them to feel that they'll be safe and well guided when they're with me. So they're very able to adapt and follow whatever lead that I give them. So I would say most of my sessions, however, are, most of my sessions contain a lot. I would say the vast majority of them are Feldenkrais functional integration lessons. A few contain Bones for Life processes, particularly as homework. A lot of my ability to decide what I'm going to do with someone, however, rests in the integral human gait framework. Mm-hmm. So that framework is not a modality, it's a theory of how to understand gait, how to look at how people walk and function, and use that to then decide what modality or how you're going to approach that person's learning in that session. So in and of itself, integral human gait does not have any pieces, or very few pieces of actual, I'll use a non-Feldenkrais term here, I'll use the term that PTs or OTs might like, which is has very few interventions. Like it doesn't have the tools for how you go about it. We actually use the Feldenkrais method as the tools for how you go about it. We actually use movement intelligence as the tools for how we go about it. But the framework of Gait is highly guides what I do in sessions.
Nice. And you created that with another practitioner?
Carol Montgomery, and actually it was a nonprofit organization that was one of my creative impulses many years ago. Carol Montgomery and Phyllis Evely, who's no longer with us, and we created a nonprofit, and that was done out of that nonprofit, and also the Bones for Life research that we have published in the last couple of years on it. Bones for Life is an alternative for geriatric exercise or rehabilitation. Was also from that organization.
Cool. And in terms of your own vision for where you might go after this point, you gonna keep doing the summit for a while, you think, or you have other ideas?
I don't know. I really think this year would be the last summit. Arlene doesn't sound like she would hang out with me for another year of doing it. I would never want to train someone else or bring someone else to be on. I don't know. We'll see. It's an extremely huge psychic and physical load on my system. I'm not really sure it's, would be good for me to keep repeating, but like Arlene said last year, after we got done, after a few months, we got done with it. She says, it's a little like childbirth. You sort of forget how bad the birthing process can be. And then you think you're ready to do it again. So you never know, we might be. I mean, you get very excited once you see it happening and people start responding. It's very sweet and has a lot of things that bubble up. So I kind of doubt it, but I'm certainly not going to close the door yet either.
Well, I really appreciate how you're bringing together the community, the Feldenkrais community, in such a dynamic way, and I can really relate to that thing about the difference between just being in my private practice versus even doing something like this, having conversations with people feels really meaningful to me. And yeah, I just think it's such a gift that you're bringing to the community and the world. And it feels reflective of, I had actually never been to a Feldenkrais conference before this year in DC. And the feeling that I had when I was there was there is this real interest in the community, in the direction of community, in the direction of what are our each of our unique gifts that we're bringing together, and how can those kind of buoy all of us and our contribution to the world. So I feel like what you're doing is really right in line with what I was feeling when I was there, in terms of how the whole community is really shifting, in my understanding, because I've only been a part of it for 15 years relative to some people, but that it's less about us as individual, practitioners competing against each other, and more about this collaborative community direction. So I feel like the summit is really speaking to that and illustrating that and living that. So thanks for.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. I love conferences, and I, highly recommend people, if you have a conference you can go to every year or every 2 or 3 years, the summit is no replacement for a conference. People tell me, oh, it's not. I love the conferences. And I think the summit is fabulous. I really do. I think, one of the trainers wrote me and said, my gosh, this is an incredible bang for the buck for people. And I agree that that's true, but there's something else about being in person with people. So even though I can't make this year's conference, because my husband and I are taking a group to Greece, and we will have just gotten back from a retreat in Greece, using the Feldenkrais method and other things. And I'll miss it, but I'm sorry that I'm going to miss it, and hope more people get to do conferences too. Yeah. I'm glad you got to go last year.
Yeah, me too. Well, thanks, Cynthia.
Well, thank you, Tiffany. Thank you for everything that you're doing, your creative sparks and all your very interesting online work. And I appreciate our collaboration.
Yeah, me too.
I loved having you in the summit last year.
Oh, thanks. It was great to do it. I also think it really was such a cool opportunity to bring together and articulate some things for me too. Just it felt like yeah, I it was an integration process for me to do that. So thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.